Hey everyone, thanks for stopping by my channel. Definitely appreciate you taking time out of your day to pay me a visit. I'm going to go ahead and show you all how to make a rod sock and show you my variation of making a rod sock. I've been making rod socks for a few years now, and I've had a few different designs here and there. As like most of the stuff that I do on the side, whether it's painting lures or making spinner baits or swim jigs, stuff like that, I did it as a way to save money. And making rod socks is no different. When I started making these, I think rod socks were about 10 to 15 bucks, and I think they're still around that price. And you can make one of these relatively inexpensive. I should take that back. You can make about 10 of these relatively inexpensive. You can't just make one of them inexpensively. You got to make a lot of them. So it's a lot of fun, in my opinion, to make these, and just with the different variations you can do. So yeah, I'm gonna just kind of jump right into it. And the first thing that you are gonna need, material-wise, and I thought I had everything, but so material-wise, I'm gonna post links to everything in the video description. But the main important thing that you need to get is this cable sleeving stuff. I only make this for casting rods. I don't have enough spinning rods to really justify it. But when it comes to most casting rods, I'm using a 1-inch cable sleeve. And one of the great things about Amazon is you can get really any color you want. So I've got some black ones. I've got this black and red one. And I've got like a black and blue one somewhere as well. But you need cable sleeving. And you're going to need a fat screwdriver. You might not immediately understand why, but we'll get to that part. You're going to need some heat shrink tubing. If you're using a 1-inch, ideally you want 1/2-inch heat shrink tubing. I ran out, so I'm using 3/4. 3/4 works. For 1-inch, it's not ideal. 1/2-inch is certainly ideal. 1-inch is too big, and 1/4-inch is way too small. So 1/2-inch ideal, 3/4-inch will work if you need to. Those are the basics for just making the rod sock. Now, if you want to make a rod sock with either a loop on the end so you can hang up a rod sock, and you want to build it with this lanyard, you want some 3mm paracord and a single hole cord lock is what I use, as well as just a small little flathead screwdriver. And then you're also going to need, so these are the things that you're going to need to buy, typically. I don't think most people have this stuff. Maybe heat shrink tubing most people have, but stuff that you probably already have on hand. I guess screwdrivers, you already have that on hand. But you're going to need scissors at the bare minimum. Ideally, you'll have a hot knife. And I'll get into why you want a hot knife. I bought a very cheap, like $10 hot knife from Harbor Freight. It's just a soldering iron with an X-Acto tip on it. Very simple, but it makes making these a lot less frustrating. But in a pinch, you can use scissors. So that's the materials, and of course, you're going to need a rod that you need a rod sock for, right? So I just picked up 2 new rods from Tricky over at Tricky Sticks. I'm really excited about them. I still need to get some new reels for them. This is the 3rd time I've tried to do this video. I've had camera issues, and I've had various other issues trying to make this video, but hopefully 3rd time's a charm with this. So I'm down to my very last rod that actually needs a rod sock, so I'm hoping things go smoothly on this video. But yeah, I got a, this is actually the first for me. This is a telescoping rod. This is going to be my new flippin' and maybe like a backup frog rod, but it's telescoping, which is just interesting. I've seen telescoping rods and I've heard about them when I'm musky fishing a lot. You don't hear about them too much in the bass world, but this being a think it's like 7.5 if I remember. Uh, it's like a 7.5 foot rod, I want to say, maybe 7 foot. But my my rod locker in that Polar Craft fits. It's a tight squeeze at like 7 foot 3 inches. I can fit those in here. So my frog rod that I have from Tricky, that doesn't fit in that rod locker. And some of my jig rods didn't fit in there. So having a nice telescoping rod, this is going to fit in that rod locker, no problem. It's going to be awesome. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do, we haven't cut anything to length yet. I like doing this step first and foremost because we're going to add a cuff. We're going to do a double cuff or a triple cuff. I forget exactly what it is, but we're going to be adding a roll to the end of this, and that can take up some space, and sometimes it gets messed up, and this can unravel, and sometimes you just need to chop it and start over. So it's better to add the cuff first before you chop this thing to length, so that you don't chop this to length and then you end up having to eat up like 4 inches and then your rod sock's too short. So we're going to add a cuff to this. And just a side note, if you have used scissors to cut these in the past, when we're adding this cuff, when we're rolling it like that, it might have a tendency to unravel on you, and that can be a really frustrating part. Even when you have it melted at the tip here with like a hot knife, if you were cutting it earlier, it can still unravel a little bit, but this is really, to me, the most challenging part of this and frustrating. So once you get the cuff down, it is much easier going forward on this. So the first step is going to be the most frustrating. Practice makes perfect. With that said, so the way that we're going to cuff this, I normally just kind of put a finger in there and just kind of work it out a little bit. And then I use 2 thumbs. And what we're going to do is, peel it open like a peanut or a pistachio. And you want to do it kind of fast. And we want to get that initial cuff. So you'll notice that some of this is kind of like sticking out, kind of wild. That is it starting to unravel. And again, this was cut with a hot knife, so it didn't unravel nearly as bad. But if you are using just scissors and it's not melted on the end there, you want to do it quick. The quicker you do that, the less likely it is to unravel. So just give it some try. Just keep trying at it. But you want to get just a normal cuff like this. So you got your first cuff, and then I normally do this cuff at least twice. So that's cuff number 2. And normally lengthwise, I want to try to make this about 1 inch. I like having a little bit of a bigger, bulkier cuff on that. So that's number 2. Then I'm going to do it once more. I really feel that having that third one, especially if you're going to be adding a lanyard to yours and not just doing a standard rod sleeve. If you're just doing a rod sleeve without the lanyard or one of the tips, like a loop tip on the end, a double cuff will probably be fine, but triple cuff really is that kind of sweet spot that I found. So now that we got our cuff, we want to kind of expand it to make it easier to slide down the rod. And to do that, I guess you're here thinking I have all my ducks in a row. I forgot to mention you're going to need a heat gun or a hair dryer for this part. Hair dryer works just fine for this part. Heat gun works good for me. This is where we're going to take our fat screwdriver end. The fat screwdriver handle is what we want. We want to slide that down and kind of stop it right at that fat end. And then we're just going to run a heat gun over it. And you want to make short, quick passes, because especially if you have a heat gun will melt this sleeving if you let it linger there too badly or too long. Hair dryer shouldn't have to worry about it as much, but a heat gun will absolutely melt this stuff if you let it linger too long. So you do some quick passes, and then this is going to be hot, so be mindful of that. And I'll just kind of work that sleeve back and forth over that handle to really just, again, work that sleeving. And then I'll work it down just a little bit more. I like having that expanded quite a bit. And then just do one last run over it with the heat gun. And then just like that, again, just kind of work it over. And now we got our kind of flared out end there. And that's going to make sliding it down the fishing pole a whole lot easier. So, next thing we can do is move on to actually measuring the length of this that we're going to need. So, I'm going to go ahead and, I don't know how well this is going to work with the camera, but move this stuff out of the way. This is the box for the hot knife that you can pick up at Harbor Freight, $10. Just a hobby wood burner is what they call it. So this is going to be a little bit awkward since this is a telescoping rod, but we're going to just pretend that this is at full length. When I am measuring out a rod sock, I've got maybe about 10 or 15 casting rods, each with kind of a dedicated purpose. Again, this one is going to primarily be for flipping and pitching, Texas rigs, punch rigs, maybe a frog. Something that's not going to have treble hooks is really what it's going to be. I have no intention of throwing any sort of treble hook lure on this rod. So my hook keeper is right here. If your hook keeper is back here, you don't have to worry about this as much. You know, it's back behind the reel. But when it's in front of the reel, you want to kind of imagine, or better yet, if you got one laying around, you can just visualize it. So I'm going to pretend that this jig head is what I'm going to be having on here. So when you have that, set up like that, ideally you want, maybe about 2-3 inches in front of where that longest lure that you're going to have on here, you want that kind of in front of it. And again, if you're going to be having something with like treble hooks, I'd give yourself some more room. So in this instance, right here is about all that I need to worry about. This is not a precision thing, okay? Because we can make up for it once we actually cut this sleeve down to size. So I'm going to go ahead and say that's good enough. Scoot that rod down there. And there's my rod tip right here. And I'm going to add about 2 inches of extra space here. So again, this is not a precision engineering thing. So here's the rod tip. I'm going to go ahead and just say like right there is good enough. I'm going to just use a magic marker to mark this. Just say that's good enough. Give myself a little bit of room to make some mistakes. Let's see if that's actually showing up. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and go chop this down to size now. Alright, well, I'm going to try to record this as well as I possibly can. In that little, just in my paint booth, just because when you start melting through this stuff, it kind of gives off some nasty smells. If you don't have a ventilation setup like this, I would do it either outside or wear like a face mask or something. I can't imagine breathing in these fumes is a good idea. So again, I'm gonna just use this, and this has been heating up for about 10 minutes. No idea how long it actually takes to get up to heat, but all we're going to be doing is just chopping right through that line. And it just melts through that like butter. Does not have to be a pretty looking thing, because that's going to get all figured out at the end. So, alright, so now that we got that chopped down to size, I'm going to go ahead and just do another quick fit test, make sure I didn't screw anything up. We're looking pretty good. So again, this is kind of where you can kind of do that final determination now of where are you gonna want this to actually finally seat. Because what we're going to be doing, we need to cap off that end that we just chopped, and we're going to be using our heat shrink. So when it comes to the heat shrink, I'm normally chopping off about 1/2 inch. I feel that that's really all that you need. So I'm going to try to make this a little bit prettier. I really got that crooked last time. But yeah, about 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch is really all that you're going to need. And we're going to go, we're going to put a cap on it. We're going to slip this over it. So when we're talking about getting that final measurement, what I normally do to make sure that this rod has no chance of poking out of that capped end, some people will just slap this on here or just do a simple fold over and call it a day. I've lost too many rod socks, and I've ruined too many of them just by sliding a pole up to it too fast. I normally will fold it like a taco first, and then I'll fold it over on itself. And work with, it's about 3/4 inch of space that gets taken up. So that's kind of where my rod tip is going to be sliding. And that's kind of where you'll want to take into account for where, again, this is going to seat relative to where your hook keeper is and where your bait's going to line up. So this, I'm looking at this, and I'm going to want to sacrifice some of the end on this, I think. that's going to really be ideal. So I'm going to chop off maybe about another inch of this. And this end, I don't really care that much. I'm going to just use scissors. I really only need to use that hot knife on the side that I'm going to be cuffing. And I'm not cuffing this side, but the side that I just chopped off of that main spool is going to get cuffed on the next one that I do. So that's why you want to use the hot knife on this end. So, again, we're going to taco it and then fold it over. And that's going to kind of be my measurement. I think that's going to look out pretty good with where it is down there. So, I'm going to go ahead and take this off the rod again. Okay, so if you're one of those folks that like to do a loop on the end of your rod sock to hang it up, we're not talking about the lanyard end for the hooking it up to a reel, but if you want a loop at the end of your rod sock, again, my way of doing it, I never used these loops, but if I was going to, again, I would do the taco method and then fold it over again. And you want to make your loop with your lanyard, just do like a simple double overhand knot or something like that, and then feed that through that section, and then you'd feed on your heat shrink and do it that way. But again, I'm not adding a loop because I don't use those loops, so I've got that, again, just hopefully this is showing up for y'all. I taco it, and then I fold that taco over. And that's all, about a half an inch is really all I'm doing. Not much. When it's double folded over like that, a rod tip's not going to be going through that. So then you take your heat shrink tube. You don't drop your heat shrink tube. You take it with your hands. Just slip it on over. And I slide this down just to the point where that sleeve is just poking out. And then with a 1/2 inch or a 3/4 inch, you can let go of it, and that heat shrink tube will keep that taco folded over. And we can just go ahead and take our heat gun. Now, if you don't have a heat gun and you only have a hair dryer, for this part, you're going to want to use a lighter. I don't think a hair dryer is going to be hot enough to be able to shrink the shrink tube. But make sure you got power on your heat gun. All right. So again, just like when we did the cuffing earlier, you don't want to linger on a certain spot for too long because you will melt the sleeve. You want to keep it moving around fast enough, but slow enough where you're actually shrinking down that heat shrink tubing as well. The other tip, keep your heat gun pointed up so that heat's not traveling down the whole rod sock and potentially melting it or deforming it. Keep it pointed up, and that will help eliminate or reduce the potential for any sort of damage. So, again, since I am not using 1/2 inch like I should be, I'm using 3/4. Once it kind of gets to a point where it's at, I'm going to take some pliers and kind of give it some encouragement to collapse even further. I'm going to just kind of hold it down in place. and just hit it again with a heat gun and make sure that it's collapsing as much as it possibly can. And again, if you're using 1/2 inch heat shrink tubing, you don't have to do this kind of manipulation as much. But once I'm kind of at the end there, I'm gonna just crimp this and kind of hold it in place. You can do that if you're using 1/2 inch. I never had to do that when I was using 1/2 inch. It's only when I'm using this 3/4 inch that I kind of crimp it, hold on to it, and wait for it to fully cool down so that it maintains that shape. Do a quick heat test. It's warm, but I think that's about as good as it's gonna get. It ain't exactly the prettiest thing when you do that kind of crimp on it, but that's gonna work. Nice and tight, not going anywhere. Yeah, not going anywhere. I guess I need to hit this a little bit harder. All right, we'll let that side cool down. We're gonna go ahead and move on down to the other side. I mean, at this point, you got yourself just a standard rod sock, right? You can stop here if that's all you want. We're gonna go ahead and add a lanyard to this so that we can secure the rod sock to the actual rod, and we're not gonna lose a rod sock. Well, we're not gonna lose a rod sock unless we lose the whole rod and reel, which I haven't done that, but boy howdy, I have certainly lost plenty of rod socks over the years without having these lanyards. Go ahead and slide this on down the rod, do a test fit. Well, that turned out perfect. I got that right at the right length. I got put a jig on that, just like that. And we got a nice little 3-inch gap, and I'm not going to open up any of my frogs to test fit that. Won't worry about it. But yeah, that's absolutely perfect. So at this point, this is where we're going to take our measurement for our lanyard. So when we do this lanyard, the way I do it, I should say, I guess let me find the end to this. When we wrap this paracord around this cuff, I'm not doing a full loop. I'm doing like a 300 degrees, I guess, if you're going to put it in degrees. I'm going to put it on one end over here. I'm going to leave about a 1/2-inch gap between where this lanyard is going to come out the bottom and where the other side is going to come out the bottom. I've done it where that you wrap it, one full time around and then have it come out the same hole. I don't like that because once you draw it tight, it binds. And I found that if you keep it about a 1/2-inch opening on here, when you loosen up that lanyard, that rod sock will just come off nice and smooth. You don't have to fight with it. You don't have to do anything with it. It will just come right on off. So when we're measuring it, we're going to be measuring with that in mind. So for me, I normally will be putting these lanyards around the reel handle. If you wanted to do it around the actual reel itself, you can do that, but just the actual reel handle is really all I'm worried about. So the way I measure that is I'm going to wrap it sort of just like that. Do like one full loop around there, and then I'm going to measure it out to where like an inch or two beyond the handle. Again, nothing precise here. This is just me being quick and just eyeballing stuff. So knowing that, I have that spot now, then I'm going to just double it up. And that's what I would be doing for a standard rod. This being a telescoping rod, I want to be able to use this both when it's collapsed, but also when it's all the way out here. And again, this being my first telescoping rod, this might be a stupid idea. I really don't know. But, actually, you know what? The more I'm thinking about this, I can't really think of a reason why I would want. I'm not going to waste that much, so I'm going to just stick to what I'm doing. I'm going to just do the standard. I'm going to only build this rod sock for it being collapsed. So, again, I'm going to just measure this again. Doing one full loop around down here, going back down here, measuring it about an extra 2 inches or so, maybe an extra inch, something like that. Holding on to it, and then just doubling it up, and that's where I'm going to be cutting it. And again, the more that you do this, you might find your own approach to this. Maybe you find you're cutting too much of this and you're wasting it. You know what, you figure out the way that you want to do it and how much you want to be using for this. So with paracord, just like this sleeving, we don't want it to be frayed. You know, it's like an old shoelace, right? I don't want that shoelace to get frayed. So I'm going to just go grab a lighter real quick, and we're going to go ahead and melt these ends. I could go use that hot knife if I really wanted to, but I already put it away. So I'm going to just go grab a lighter, and we'll do things that way. All right, so we're going to go ahead and just melt the ends of this paracord real quick with a lighter. Just kind of quickly go over it real quick. You'll kind of see it melt and kind of close itself off. Do the other side. Good enough. Easy peasy. All right, we're going to go ahead and put this on this, and we're going to take this off the rod again. All right, so to add the lanyard to the rod sock, this is where we're going to be using a small flathead screwdriver. I suppose a Phillips would work just fine, or any other small bit. I've just used a small flathead. So the really great thing about this expandable sleeve is, again, it's so flexible. It's really easy to get in between that webbing. So orientation-wise, it really doesn't make a difference. You know, it's just one big circle. So what I do is I'll take one end, lay that in the cuff. I'm gonna see how well this actually shows up for you. Hopefully this doesn't completely wash things out here, but you just lay that kind of right down in that groove at the very bottom there. And what we're gonna do, I'm gonna try to do this without even looking at it. Take that small flathead, and at the very end, you just lay it on top of that paracord, and very kind of gently, I'm going to just kind of work it back and forth and just put pressure on it. You're going to see that start to poke through. Sometimes you'll see that the webbing is kind of in the way. I kind of just try to brush that a little bit out of the way. But normally if you're just working that back and forth real gentle, that's just going to pop out on its own without damaging things. If you're having a real difficult time, just try it again. This material is very forgiving. So again, put the pressure on there, just kind of work it back and forth. As you see that webbing material kind of come up, you can just kind of move it out of the way if you need to. Well, that didn't work either. So sometimes this can be a pain, sometimes it can be real easy. There we go. See, again, once it kind of gets started through there just like that, you don't need that screwdriver anymore. Just take your fingernails and grab it. Go ahead. Now we got that out. Now, this is where, again, you kind of wrap it. And again, I want to leave about a 1/2 inch opening between there. So I'm going to just lay it on in there. Again, kind of where there's going to be an opening there. And again, just use that screwdriver to work it on through. And once it pokes through, there you go. You can pull it on through. You'll let that other side just kind of nestle in there. And you pull it so that it's even. And now we got the makings of our drawstring, or lanyard, or whatever you want to call it. So at that point, just grab one of these stoppers, and then you feed it on through. I guess before you feed it on through, it doesn't hurt to make sure that it's nice and straight. And then you just bring it on down. And then the last sort of personality you can add to this, you can either tie a closed loop just with a double overhand. I started doing that at the beginning. I ended up deciding I really don't want a closed loop, because a closed loop, there's plenty of things I feel on a boat or in a fishing room, just anywhere, that if it catches on that loop, it's just going to cause a bad thing to happen. So I would rather minimize the risk of that and just tie off both of these ends. So I'm going to just tie a very simple overhand knot at the very end there. That way that stopper can't come off if I draw it down too fast. Do it on both sides. And that, folks, is our finished product. So we can go ahead and slip this on down the rod. Position that over there. And now we got ourselves a good old rod sleeve that ain't coming off. And it's easy enough. Boom, bada bing, I'm ready to go fish. I feel like there was something else I was going to add into that. But yeah, I guess that's really all there is to say. I hope you all enjoyed this. Hopefully you all can get some benefits out of this. Go make your own. It's really easy. And again, if you got a whole lot of rods that need rod socks, you know, it's for one of those spools of this expandable sleeve, it's like $25 for 100 feet. So, I mean, most of my bass rods are about 7 feet. You know, on the short side, it's like 6'6". On the long side, they're like, I think my frog rod's about 8 feet. But you're going to be getting at least 10 rods out of 100 feet. More likely to get somewhere around 12 to 14, so that's 26 bucks. Heat shrink tubing is super cheap. The paracord's pretty cheap. And again, I didn't mention, but the great thing with Amazon, I really don't like shopping at Amazon all that much, but you can't beat the selection they got on different things. They got a whole bunch of colors on the expandable sleeve, which I think I mentioned. But I mean, the companies are different, right? The people that make this expandable sleeve and the paracord, they ain't the same. But you can get matching colors fairly easily. I think there's at least 5 or 6 different sleeve colors, and man, when I was ordering paracord, they had hundreds of colors to choose from. So the one other thing that I'm gonna add here that I haven't done yet, but I intend to. So I custom make every rod sleeve for one rod. I don't pump out like a bunch of like 7.6 or 7-foot rod sleeves to like universally fit. If I'm custom making something, I want to custom make it for that particular thing. The downside to that is if you have a whole bunch of rod sleeves of the same color, but different lengths, and you are using 6 to 8 rods in a day, and now you got 6 to 8 rod sleeves laying in the bottom of your boat, trying to figure out which rod sleeve went to what rod can sometimes be a challenge. A few different ways to address that I've hemmed and hawed over. Color coding things, have a lot of different paracord options, and know that like, okay, my frog rod is the black and red sleeve with like a random green paracord or something. That to me was going to get a little bit expensive buying all the different color paracords. I've only got this red and black. I've got just standard black right now. My idea is I have a sister-in-law that has an embroidery machine. I'm going to go see if I can have her create some fabric labels that I'm going to just figure out a way to put on this paracord. Something simple like that. I think that will be a nice way to be able to identify which rod sock goes to what rod. So, thanks again, everyone. Again, hopefully you got something out of this. And if you have any questions along the way of making this, feel free to drop me a question. I will do my best to answer it for you. So until next time, thanks for hanging out with me, and we'll see you again.